Opening slide graphic text, title, Session 2. Work conditions, interests, and contributions. An Introduction to Discovery, Part 3. Considering Possibilities in Job Planning, with Milton Tyree. Logos, Belonging Matters, and Talks That Matter.net.
So, discovering possibilities previously not considered. All right, so what I'm going to do now is tell you an old story, and it's an old story because I'm an old guy, and I can't help it. But it's a story that I learned a lot from, and I want to share that with you, hoping it's helpful for you too. It's a story where Tim and I knew each other in a couple of different contexts. Several years apart, actually 4 years apart. Neither of us changed a lot in that period of time. You know, I wanted good things for Tim all the way along, but I didn't know a whole lot about doing it initially. So that's what the story's about. What he learned and what I learned from him. So Tim's a young man I met when he was a high school student, and he was a high school student in the class that I used to teach when I was no longer teaching high school. It was a self-contained special education class in the high school with students with, they would say moderate disability, whatever that means. So he was a student in that class. Now, the high school wanted to do something really good. They wanted to set up what they called work transition program. I think it's what you all call work experience here for students in the high school. And they knew that I had an agency now helping former students get jobs, so they called me and said, "Hey, Milt, can you come back in and help us design this program?" And I said, "Sure." So I was very much in job placement mode in that day, start with the job and not the person. And there was a little mom and pop grocery, nice, the Shaws, really nice people, walking distance from the high school. And so we contacted them to see if they would like to partner with the high school to be a work experience site. And they said yes. And I think that was a really nice partnership for the school and for Shaw's Grocery. But it was an awful partnership for Tim because the job just didn't fit him at all. But nonetheless, that's what we did. So here are some things I learned about Tim. I was not his job support person. Somebody else with community employment was. But nonetheless, I learned these things about Tim. He's one of these people where we said he will always need a job coach. Sure, everybody can work, but there's some people who are always going to need a job coach or a support person with them. And Tim was one of those people we said was that. And that's because he needed continuous supervision or prompting to stay on task, like rotating stocks, sweeping floors, and tearing down boxes. And that's just what we observed. And he's one of these people that said, everybody knows Tim can't sit still. He's always on the move. Has a short attention span. He wouldn't watch for cars when crossing traffic. So danger was something we needed to be attentive. Just had to cross a little road to get to Shaw's Grocery, but wouldn't want him crossing it by himself because he just literally would not watch for cars. And he liked to talk a lot. He's one of those people who liked to talk so much it was hard to listen to everything they were saying. He'd come into a room and kind of start scanning there's a bulb out over there, and have you seen the Wildcats, and all that kind of stuff, on and on. The Wildcats is University of Kentucky basketball team. So 1987, that's what I learned about Tim. And then in 1988, I was still at community employment, and the state got a grant through the University of Kentucky to teach new people how to do what we were doing. And we were the only organization in the state. We'd been there since 1981. So they recruited me to teach. They didn't know if I knew anything about teaching, but they figured, well, Milton must know something about this because they've helped some people get jobs. So I don't know if that was a really good assumption to make, but that's what they did. So they hired me, and I left community employment in 1988. And I went to work for the Human Development Institute, a department within the university, and my job was to prepare professional development for people going to be doing work like me. They were going to get money to develop other, what we called supported employment, which you would call open employment programs in the state. And I said, great. And so I showed up, and one of the very first things I got to do was go to an SRV immediately followed by passing, which is it was a 5-day workshop evaluation of human services based on social role valorization theory. Wow. You know, that's where, like I said earlier, I learned, why is it so hard to get jobs for people? Social devaluation. I had all kinds of questions. I don't mind saying that. I had all kinds of questions about SRV. I had a lot of things about it that were really unsettling to me. A lot of things, I mean, SRV can be kind of unsettling. But I found it exceedingly compelling. And so I was in a real advantageous position that I had a pretty good travel budget. So I got to travel to Massachusetts, different places, hear Dr. Wolfensberger speak, go to all kinds of related events. I just immersed myself in the theory. It's thought, I've got to learn more about this. I also, even though it was Mark who really lit the fuse when I was teaching in high school about knowing that my students and the people on my crew in the sheltered workshop could do so much more than what they were being asked to do. I really had a chance now to lean in on that. The problem was Mark, I'd been to a Mark Gold event, earlier, before I started working with community employment. And so I knew a bit about it, but, Mark had passed away, and I didn't know Mike Callahan. And so I got to meet Mike Callahan, who had taken over for Mark, and he had just written a book, Getting Employed, Staying Employed. I knew if I was going to teach about open employment, I needed to know more than what I'd just been doing. I'd studied with some people like Paul Wayman at Virginia Commonwealth University. I wasn't just making it up, but I sure didn't know enough, like to have a seminar for people. So I got this big stack of books, and I proceeded to read them. And a lot of them were putting me to sleep. I thought this would be good to take home with me because I'm having trouble getting to sleep worrying about this job. But then I saw this one, Getting Employed, Staying Employed by Mike Callahan. And I thought, oh my gosh. He's got what Mark had. What he's talking about is the same thing that attracted me to Mark. And one of the chapters in this book was on something called the vocational profile, which is what Discovery came from. Now the vocational profile is the document that people complete recording what they've learned in Discovery, but at that time, that's what the whole process was called. And the name was changed some years later because we realized that people were using the profile as a verb. They were profiling people. And it was like the purpose of it wasn't so much getting to know people, it was filling out the form, which isn't what Discovery is. Thus the name Discovery. So I contacted Mike. This was before, this sounds really, really old, and it is, but this is before, email or, and that kind of stuff. But I found him, I found his phone number, I called him, and I said, I need your help designing this curriculum. He helped me design the curriculum. He came in and did workshops. We set up 5-day systematic instruction workshops that Penny Balaki and Mike came in and taught, and man, oh man. So we had all this stuff. And so because of Mike, I had a really good curriculum that he wrote and helped me teach. So then I ran into a kind of a dilemma. I was teaching all this really cool stuff that I learned in SRV theory and that I learned from Mark Gold and Associates that I had never used. And I was standing up in front of a bunch of people like y'all saying, I would be honest, I'd say, no, I haven't had a chance to do this, but man, is it dynamite. And so I got really restless at the university, and I thought, it's time to leave. It's time to get back into the field. I was hungry. I thought, I think this stuff could make the work so much better. So I started my own business. And my very first referral for service was Tim. There you go. And so I thought, now, this is interesting. I have said that this guy's always going to need a job coach, and now I am his job coach. So my wife, who I persuaded to resign my nice full-time job at the university with all these weeks off and benefits to start my own business, am I going to need to tell her, well, I'm going to help Tim get a job and we're going to be together forever? Kind of like I promised to you, in our marriage, but it's going to be me and Tim. I thought that's not going to work. you know. But I really wasn't worried because I felt like I have a new way to approach this, you know. We're not going to be starting with the job. We're going to be starting with the person. And I'm going to learn things about Tim that I never knew. He was placed at Shaw's Grocery. So I remembered all this stuff from the past. And I remember the meeting with him and his mom in their living room. You know, isn't it interesting how you still have those images in your mind? I mean, honestly, I said earlier, I can still remember meeting with Jim. That was like 40 years ago. And this was more than 30 years ago, and I can still remember it. I don't know why that happens, but it's like, so anyhow, Tim wasn't sitting in the living room with us. He was on the move. He'd be there for a couple of minutes, and then he'd leave, and his mom would holler, "Tim, you better get back in here. This man's going to help you get a job, you know." And he'd say, "I want a job," and he'd rattle off about 5 places he wanted to work. And I thought, well, that's interesting. But one of the things I wanted to do, first of all, was apologize to them both. And I said, if you'll give me another chance, you know, the Shaw's Grocery thing, I'm sorry. You know, I thought it would be okay, but it wasn't. And I think I want to take a new process this time. I've learned about this process. It was called the vocational profile. I didn't even say the name of it, but I said, I want to spend some time with Tim and really understand what he's good at doing and what he likes doing. Would that be okay with you? And they said, fine. A lot of coming and going from the living room. Tim really wanted to work, but he said he wanted to work everywhere. You know, I didn't get a lot of precision from that. Not that I didn't pay attention to it and write it down, but I wasn't seeing a pattern, you know. Other than he seemed to have a really high really strong work ethic. And then his sister came in, and she asked me a question that I've never gotten before from a family member. She said, "So can you get Tim to quit taking apart my electronic devices?" And I said, well, tell me about that. And she said, well, he took apart my VCR and it doesn't work anymore, and I'm pretty mad about it. And I said, I can understand that. I said, no, I don't know what to say to Tim that he'll quit doing that, but I was really interested in that idea. So, start the person, not the job. And I had this different emerging set of questions. I wondered, there must be time Tim does voluntarily sit still if he's taken apart a VCR. What other times does he do that? And what are the conditions? What are the conditions under which Tim is attentive to dangers around him? There has to be somewhere, somehow. What are his interests and talents? Who are other people who'd be interested in Tim finding a new story? Who are allies? What brings out the employee in Tim? How can I get past this? So beginning with familiar aspects of life, what kinds of things do you enjoy doing that you're good at doing? And may I join you? And so one of the things that actually his mom said in his presence was, well, this weekend, Tim is going to use the weed trimmer to go around the fence, and he's going to plant some flowers for me. And I said, great. Can I join you doing that, Tim? And he said, sure. I was kind of surprised. You know, in that Tim needed somebody beside him all the time to do stuff at the grocery. I was kind of surprised to see what his weed trimming looked like. He was very methodical about planting the flowers. I asked if I could help, and he showed me what to do. That was pretty positive. Then one of the other things his mom said was, Tim does all the grocery shopping. And I thought, I bet we have a different definition of what that means, because I can't picture Tim doing all the grocery shopping. And so I said, so how do you all organize that? She said, well, he goes with me. I give him a list of stuff, and he goes to retrieve it. I said, Tim, could we do that together sometime? You know, Mrs. Woosley, would that be okay? And she said, sure. And so we did. So she gave Tim the list. I picked him up, and I said, so Tim, I'm not testing you on stuff, but I want to get to know things that you know about Crestwood, where he lived, and little rural town, and where things are, and you know how you shop. Is it okay if I ask you some stuff to do some stuff along the way? He said that'd be fine. So I said, so can you tell me how to get to the Winn-Dixie? I know where it is, but I want to see. Do you know where the Winn-Dixie is? He said, yeah, I'll show you, and he did. Well, that was pretty cool. He showed me how to get to the Winn-Dixie. It wasn't straightforward. He knew how to get there. And then when we got in, I wanted to see if he would get a shopping cart. He didn't. He was kind of used to his mom doing that, I think. And I said, "Do you want to push the cart?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "So, let's look at your list." And while we were looking at the list, I was wondering, Tim does kind of dart around sometimes, kind of fast, And I was a little worried about the Velveeta display on aisle 5. But I thought, let's just see what happens. I can just stand close by and no darting around, none of that. And really considerate of other people, no bumping into people, and there you go. And I would ask him questions about, so we're getting dog food, which kind do you get? And he would point to, I say, is it more expensive or less expensive than that one? And he'd go, I don't know. I go, okay, fair enough. And some of the words he read and some of the words he didn't read, but it gave me a good picture of that. But the main thing it gave me was seeing Tim in that social situation. I could picture him at work. Daggone it. And I'd had this image in my mind of what it looked like for him to be at Shaw's Grocery. And everybody's saying, well, he always runs around, doesn't pay attention. He did. What I told him, that social context gave him enough information that he knew how to fit in. That was interesting to me. It didn't tell me he was going to work at a grocery store, by the way. It didn't tell me he was going to plant flowers, but I was getting some ideas. And then moved more toward novel activities. We did some other regular day stuff, but I want to get into novel things because this is where a lot of the learning takes place. This is based on what's been learned. It's pre-planned to create the greatest likelihood of success. So nothing is ever a test, but you want to think, this has a pretty good likelihood of working. It's a new thing. Let's try it. It's an exploration. So my wife and I had just moved, and there was a garage. We were renting a house where there was a garage, and I was in heaven because I like cars, and I'm not real good with cars, but I like them. And I thought I'll try not to break our car, but I wanted shop lights, good shop lights. And so I bought some shop lights and the orange wire to connect to them, and so it was a wire, had a couple ends to put on a light, and then a plug on the other end. And I was going to do that, and I said, remembering his mechanical or his electrical, taking things apart interest, I said, Tim, would you like to help me with that? And he said, yeah. So I just took him to his house, and we did it on his front porch. And he seemed to have a pretty good idea how to use tools, strip wires, stuff like that. Dang. And he sat right there. He wasn't wandering off. We rewired the shop lights. And something else Tim always talked about when we were out and around, this is before everybody had a computer in their home, or most people did. He was always talking about computers, working on computers. And I knew that, I didn't really know what that would look like for Tim, but I thought, well, let's kind of give that a try. So the guy who'd taken over my job at Community Employment, I knew they were working on a new database. And so I went to Barry and I said, I'm working with Tim, this man, to look for work. He's always talking about computers. Do you have some computer work that I could come show him to see what that looks like? And he said, yeah, you could show him this database. So that's what I did. And I learned it first so I could figure out how to teach it to Tim. And I did want to teach it to Tim in this instance, not them teaching it because it wasn't his job, and I wanted some teaching experience with Tim. So I thought about how to teach it to him. I knew he knew the alphabet and stuff. So I sat beside him and I said, this big CTR, some of y'all know what those look like, with the little green letters, you hit backspace and put codes in to underline and all that. That's what it looked like. And so I said, Tim, here we're entering Bobby. See the B, hit the B, see it on the screen. If you hit the wrong letter, hit a backspace. That's what I taught him. Now go to the next one. He sat there. Here's the learning. He's not going to be a data entry expert, but he sat there for an hour and a half doing data entry. What did that teach me? If it's interesting to him, he'll sit still. Okay, I was still really interested in this mechanical stuff. So Bill lived on Thames Street, and he was this genius Volkswagen mechanic. He's passed away now, and I'd had a bunch of Volkswagens, and I had a couple of these Volkswagen vans that were actually, I had the camper vans. And Bill's one of these guys, he could hear me driving down the street and say, well, that's a problem with the exhaust valve on the third cylinder, you know. He would just, and a really nice man. And so he knew what I did for a living. And I said, do you know Tim who lives down the street? He said, no, I've never met Tim. And I said, well, I'm helping him look for work. And I think he has some mechanical ability. And you know, I don't have very much. And I'm wondering, is there some stuff you could show him around your shop? And he said, I'm rebuilding a riding mower. He could help me do that. And I said, terrific. So I introduced them. They were getting started on the mower. I just kind of go outside. I did some yard work for Bill, and I'd come inside and watch. And they got together and they rebuilt this lawnmower. And I would check in with Tim and Bill every now and then to see how it was going. Tim loved going down there. And I'd say to Bill, like, so how's it going? He goes, yeah, he's a great guy. And I said, but how is it going? Is he staying with the work? Does he get up and wander around your shop? What does it look like? When I've seen him, he's sitting there next to you. He said he always watches me. He said one time he tore up a gasket. He got in a little too big a hurry, but no big deal. And he's great. He said, I think you're right, Milton. I think he does have mechanical aptitude. I could see him doing some kind of mechanical stuff. So all of this information, I started thinking about Tim's interests, conditions, and contributions. Tasks that have clear parameters, Tim can see when the job is completed and when it's not. So he only had one job at Shaw's that was like that was tearing down boxes. The others were things that were real fuzzy when they were finished, if they ever would be finished, like rotating stock, you know. The job shouldn't have excessive downtime. It should not be something other people would see as easy. Talking should be part of the job, or at least not a quiet place. He needed a small, consistent group of co-workers, good model workers who would inform him of danger. So low turnover, Tim, that's dangerous over there. He needed a laid-back work culture where people are flexible. People, the right people. Job needed to be close to home because his mom worked 3 jobs and was a single mom. His contributions, he just had this innate mechanical aptitude, a strong work ethic, physical energy, completely transparent. So I'm going to ask you all to help me with something before lunch. This is, at the end of the day, we're going to talk about a customized plan for employment meeting that isn't exactly like this, but looks a lot like it, because the vocational profile has always had conditions, interests, and contributions. It still does today. And from that, we look at what are conditions, interests, and contributions. How does that relate to job tasks? We still do that in customized employment. Who are employers who need those tasks and connections with those employers? And so I've told you all a little bit about Tim, and we have, I think, 15 minutes before lunch. Is that right? That's just about right. That's just about what we need here. So what I'm going to ask you all to do, since you know a little bit about Tim, and you don't have a handout to do this, but you do have, well, I mean, you have this slide in your materials, if you want to look at that, but I'm going to also leave it up on the screen. I want you to pretend that you're people who were invited to Tim's planning meeting. Now, you don't know him really well, but you know a little bit about him. And these are his interests, conditions, and contributions, just like I showed you on the other slide. And I want you to, I'm going to give you 10 minutes to think about what are tasks that would be good tasks for Tim. And do I know any businesses, this is where you live, in Melbourne or some suburb of Melbourne or another part of Victoria, I don't know, just someplace where you live. Is there a business that needs those tasks? And do you know a contact person there? Somebody in that business. Does that make sense, what you're doing? Okay, so let's do that for 10 minutes, and then I'll check in with you all. All right. So I think y'all did a really nice job with that. And just have in mind that here, you don't even know Tim. You don't even know Tim. You don't even know Tim. Sam's story is next. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So you can see how the process works. And so these might be companies to explore, and you'd have an idea about why you're there. Now, one comment I want to make, a few people ventured a bit into gardening stuff, and I understand why, because I mentioned that as something that I observed him doing and helped him do and all of that. But actually, that did not emerge as one of his interests or something we were looking for. And so one of the things that happens in discovery, and this would be true with Tim, so is that people may be really good at things that they don't want to do for work, you know. I'm pretty good at cutting my grass and maintaining the lawnmower, but I don't want to do that for a job, you know, just because it's a skill I have. But so that's just one thing to keep in mind. But anyhow, I see where that came from, but just wanted to make that clarification. So I'm going to show you his actual meeting, and you're going to think it's a little lame. But it was my first meeting, and so we came up with, in terms of businesses, we just came up with 3. Now the tasks, I think, are decent. So small appliance repair, y'all had that, right? Auto parts assembly or disassembly, y'all had that. Tool fabrication, that really is because I knew Don Michael. And these were the businesses, the original businesses that I contacted. Cliff's Fix-It Shop, and that would be Cliff. We were just assuming. Really, nobody knew Cliff, but we all knew where Cliff's business, or Cliff's Fix-It Shop was. And I said, well, Cliff's got to be there. And he was, but there was not really opportunity for Tim there. So I asked the question you always ask, well, you know what I'm looking for then. Do you know somebody else, right, who might have this kind of business? And he said, no, just me here at Cliff's. And, you know, I just do my thing. All right, so not a lot there. Now, Parts Unlimited, I mentioned I like cars, and I really like muscle cars, like from the 60s and all, and GTOs and 442s and Roadrunners, all that kind of stuff. Anyhow, this Parts Unlimited is a company that remanufactures interiors for those kinds of cars. And Deb Baker has a pretty high position there, or she did at the time at least. And she used to be a classroom assistant in my special ed classroom, so I knew her. That didn't turn out to be anything either, but I thought it sure was worth checking, and the same with Toolcraft and Don Michael and tool fabrication. So one of the things that you want to do with your meetings is you can always go back to other people who attended the meeting and say, you know, these ideas didn't pan out. What other ideas do you have? You also ask those people what ideas they might have. And here's another thing that's just really important to the integrity of job development. It was here, and it still is in customized employment that we'll look at later, that you have a list of places that you know that the person you're representing knows you are going to contact on their behalf. You have permission to do that. So you don't just go out and freelance and start contacting people they don't know you're contacting. So if Cliff had suggested, yeah, there's Barry's Fix-It Shop down the street, go talk to Barry, tell him I sent you. Right? That'd be great. But I don't do that until I check in with Tim and his mom, right? I'll say, Cliff suggested Barry's. That doesn't take any time to do, or hardly any time. And that way you're never contacting businesses that people don't know you're contacting. So you run out of that potential problem of saying, hey, I found the perfect job. And they go, where is it? And you say Barry's, and they go, he's not working at Barry's. You know, because of some reason unknown, right? So you're always contacting the person with any additional businesses that you would come up with. Now, what ended up happening with Tim was I did a bit of outside networking with the family's permission. I was a member of the Chamber of Commerce of Oldham County, which is outside of Louisville. It's where the school was, where the cows are and all of that. It's a pretty rural area. And I was a member of the Chamber of Commerce, like I would encourage anybody doing job development to be, because that's where other businesses are, and you know what they do, and they know what you do. So I made an appointment. I had checked all the businesses in the industrial park, or at least for, you know, potential fit, and there weren't really any others. That's where Toolcraft was, but there really weren't any others that I was aware of. So I went to the chamber, and I just sat down with the director of the Chamber of Commerce, and I said, here's the deal. I'm helping this guy look for work. He knew what I did for a living. I'm looking for a relatively small company that deals with mechanical manufacturing or disassembly. For this guy who's going to need a consistent workforce and, people who will be on his side. He said, you need to go to product handling equipment. I said, where is that? It's not in the industrial park. He said, you're right. It's down the road off Highway 393. You might have seen the entrance to the place. You got to go down a gravel road, and you get to the end. There's this little company. It's family owned, and they make conveyor systems that they sell all over the world. Who knew? Buckner, Kentucky, a suburb of Crestwood, real close to where Tim lives. And so I went out there, and I met with them, and I asked if I could take a look around at the kind of work that they did. And this is another example of a carved job, not a customized job like we'll look at later. But I looked at the different conveyor systems that they were building, and I could really see that working for Tim. And so I talked to him about this particular conveyor system. It's actually a dry cleaner conveyor. When you go to the dry cleaner, they press a button and the clothes come zooming around. Well, this part that Tim's manufacturing here went inside of that channel. So they made the channel, they made the part that goes inside called the chain. They need somebody to make these sub-assemblies. I don't know where my beep, oh, here it is. To make these sub-assemblies, like here. And then they go over to Robert, who rivets them together. So that's one of the things I did. The next thing, I said, so would you consider hiring Tim to do that? He said, yeah, we've got a lot of demand for that right now. That'd be great to have somebody else help build those. I said, so who teaches people, new employees, how to build those? Now, I knew how to ask that question because I had studied the culturally valued analog, right? How do people typically learn a job? And I said, can they show me how they teach it? And two people, Debbie and Robert, who you can just see his back here, were the people, where is it? Right there, there's Robert. They both showed me, and I could really see Robert connecting with Tim. I thought Debbie would be great too, either one of them. But so I asked the owner of the company, Mark, if Robert could teach Tim how to do it, and I could be available then to see how that worked for him. And then we figured out something for me to do while they were doing that, so I wouldn't just be hovering over them. And they had some shipping boxes that need to be made. They look like real thick pizza delivery boxes, but this chain went in them. There you go. And so that was, Tim got hired to do part of one of the sub-assemblies. And everybody else, there are 8 people who worked there. Everybody else did everything, but Tim just made this one sub-assembly. So that's why we called it a carved job. It carved out part of somebody else's job. And they pretty much turned that part of the production over to Tim. Now, I came back later. This gets at one of the questions that was raised earlier about Kez, like, what's next? And so I would follow up. I was there. You remember Tim was supposed to have a job coach with him all the time, right? So I was there the full time, his full schedule, I don't know, probably for 4 days, just to be sure things were going well. And then I would just check in. I didn't have to tell my wife that I was going to be attached to Tim for the rest of my life. It just didn't work out that way. And one of the times I followed up, this was a couple months down the road, I was thinking, well, he's really flying on this thing. And this is not the only conveyor they make. So I asked Mark if they'd considered teaching him another kind of conveyor. And he said, well, let's get Robert in here and ask him what he thinks. I said, perfect. So Robert came in, and Mark said, Milton wonders if it's time for Tim to learn another conveyor. And he said, yes, it's time. It's past time. I taught him a new one last week. So I ask you, is Tim an employee of that company or my client? He was both, but what was big? Employee. Big employee. You remember the difference with Jim? They didn't ask my permission, or check in with me. He didn't even check in with the owner. He just taught Tim how to do it, So, thinking back on that experience, my first discovery experience, thinking what had changed, because early on he had a job placement, and that was my mindset. Put Tim someplace where they will take him. And afterwards, it was devoting time to understand Tim, his interests, talents, conditions for success. And that's how I got Product Handling Equipment Incorporated. His jobs at Shaw's Grocery were arbitrary, open-ended tasks without a connection to his interests. At Product Handling Equipment, they were mechanical tasks where it's clear when the task is completed and finished. A job coach or employment specialist or a job supporter, whatever you call him, provided all of the training and support for Tim. At Grocery, at Product Handling Equipment, I provided no instruction for Tim. They did all of it. Relationships were a secondary consideration. Didn't cross my mind, whereas relationships and their nature was a primary consideration. If I'd gone to Product Handling Equipment and the tasks and everything had been the same, but the people had been different, not the right people, would have gone somewhere else. That's all. Do you know somebody else who does this kind of stuff? So that was really how that worked. Now, there are some discovery books that Mark Gold and Associates has. If you're interested in these, Mark Gold, MARCGOLD .com. And you can get, they won't ship the hard copies internationally, but you can get PDFs. The blue book is on the process of discovery, which is really what we've talked about here. The gold book is about recording discovery. That's how you complete a vocational profile based on what you've learned. The green book is about convening a customized plan for employment meeting, which I am going to show you an example of, but I'm connecting it to customized employment later at the end of the day. And the red book is about something we're not going to talk about at all, but it's something that we teach at Mark Gold and Associates, and it's developing a visual resume, an alternative to a standardized typical resume, a resume that shows pictures of performance of the person to represent to an employer, particularly for people who don't have things that would fit in a traditional resume.
Graphic text, watch next. Session 2, Part 4, Customized Employment Planning Meetings. Closing slide, graphic text. With thanks to Milton Tyree, Mark Gold & Associates, www.markgold.com, livestream, www.beinteractive.com.au. This video was made possible with the support of an Information and Capacity Building grant through the Department of Social Services, produced by Belonging Matters. Belonging Matters makes every effort to provide accurate and up-to-date material. However, information is subject to change and our materials for reference only. This video was filmed on the land of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. Logos, Belonging Matters, and TalksThatMatter.net.